You've got your first interview invitation from a company you want to work at. Congratulations! In this video, I'm going to tell you everything about how this interview could go and how can you effectively prepare for it. My name is Ines, I'm a principal product designer and a hiring manager with 15 years of experience. My channel is about UX design, subscribe. In the previous video on this channel, I was talking about how the typical modern hiring process for UX designers looks like. And there I was explaining that there are 4 stages of the hiring process that are not necessarily equal the stages of interviews that you might have. But the initial call with the company is almost exclusively belong to the screening stage. But as we discussed last time, it is very much dependent on whom you will be talking to during this interview. Because big tech companies, they tend to hire recruiters or recruiting agency that do this initial call and do the screening there. If the company is smaller, they don't have that advantage, and usually you jump on a call with either a designer, maybe a head of design, or even with a PM or an engineer. And this is the crucial information to get before the interview because it will change how you should prepare for the interview and how the whole course of the conversation will go. First, let's cover the interviews with recruiters that are mostly done for big tech companies. The typical call with the recruiter is aimed to check if the person is a real person, how well this person speaks English, what is their visa situation and job permits, what are their salary expectations. This information is required to decide if the person can even move through the hiring process. The other goal that a recruiter might have is to give a candidate an overview of the next stages in the interviews. And sometimes, very rarely, a recruiter wants to check if your values match the values of a team or a company. For that, they might ask you so-called behavioral questions. But because recruiters, they are not designers, they don't know how to assess your portfolio and how to effectively say if you are ready to do the job or not, they will not be asking you questions about your design work. An example of this call is my initial talk with Zalando, the company I'm working on right now. I already made a video about how I got the job at Zalando, where I go in depth about how the interview was structured, how long did I wait for everything, and how many stages did I have. So go and check it if you've missed it. But here today, in the context of our conversation, I want to just outline you how the call was structured. The recruiter asked me to introduce myself, then the recruiter asked me to introduce myself, asked where I'm from, what is my visa situation, all those things. And I think they were mostly listening how well do I speak and what are my storytelling qualities. Then they explained to me what awaits me in the next stages. And after that, the recruiter asked me one behavioral question. This question was, how would you describe an egoless design? In the video that I mentioned above, I explained how I answered this question, what did I think through the whole process, and so on. So go and check this video if you are interested in my answer, but that was a typical call with a recruiter. I believe that you can expect the similar structure in 99% of the cases if you see that the person you will be talking to is a recruiter. But as I said, if a company is smaller, they might not be able to afford a person that does hiring specifically. So what they usually do is that they assign a person from the actual product team to do the initial call. It could be another designer or a head of design. It could be a PM, an engineer even. In some cases, it's the CEO who does the hiring. But in all situations, these people, they usually couple the initial call with the screening stage and some other stages, usually the culture fit stage. So the goal of the call is turning from just knowing a bit of a basic information from a candidate and explain to them their hiring process to make already some checks if they want to go forward with this candidate. And because every person tends to do this differently depending on the job title, seniority, or a job function, it is safer if you ask who you will be talking to upfront and what can you expect from the call. Because there could be some surprising situations. And I will explain to you 2 examples that I personally experienced. The first example is for the company called Product Board. And there I had the initial call with the head of design right away. And during the 30-minute conversation, we spoke mostly about my motivation and my most highlights in the recent projects. It was not a portfolio deep dive interview, we had it on the later stages. It was the call where the person wanted to know if I will be the best fit for the company. And they were specifically interested in my values. How would I lead designers? What would I do in this situation, Why do I want to change the job? Why the product board is the best fit for me? So things like that. And it was a great call because it felt less formal than a typical call with a recruiter. We could talk about UX design, we could match our values, we could see if we can work with each other effectively. And I was encouraged to ask my questions as well. So I feel that it was more of a culture fit interview type than the screening interview type. Another example that I had is for the company that is called Speech. There, at the initial call, I had a talk with 2 PMs, and we were also talking mostly about my approach to UX design. They were giving me some challenges, some situations, and they were listening how I would work with these situations. So it also felt like a culture fit interview. It was impossible to prepare for these questions because you never know what questions will be coming. But because I knew that I will be talking with 2 PMs already, I prepared myself to answer questions about the product strategy, about the processes and so on. So knowing whom you will be talking with is essential for you to get ready. And this is my best advice for you for the initial call. If you are not sure whom you will be talking to, if you were not given any instructions, then proactively ask what is expected from you. It is absolutely allowed, and most companies, they are happy to take your question because they also want to use this time effectively and they want a candidate coming prepared. What can you do in a theoretical situation when a company will not give you any information about what is coming? Then a small tip for you: you can Google the person that you see in your invite and look up them in LinkedIn. That will already give you some information about who they are and what can you expect. If you will be talking with a PM, as I did, you shall prepare to answer the product questions. With engineers, be ready to double down on engineering and technical stuff of your designs and so on. My take on this type of initial calls in comparison to the calls with the recruiters is that it usually feels more informal, but at the same time, it is more stressful to have the call like that. Because with recruiters, you can always trust that you will go through a certain structure that is safe and you can master the structure. You can rehearse your introductions, you can look up the most common questions that recruiters are asking, and because those will not be the questions about UX design, they are usually pretty shallow. And those are the questions like worst experience, best experience, your weakness, your strength. At the job interviews course for UX designers, I'm giving everyone the list of 100 or close to 100 questions that recruiters are usually asking before the interviews, and I narrow them down to certain groups because 100 questions is impossible to prepare, but if you group them somehow, you can see the logic. And also check the free job interview preparation checklist down in the video description because I have a lot of behavioral questions there as well, most common ones and most common groups and topics that you can expect to discuss. At the same time, although the recruiter's call might feel structured or formal, they are usually done pretty professionally. Whereas the initial call with a smaller company might really differ in terms of maturity of an interviewer and in terms of how you feel on the interview. I've personally been in many situations where I felt interrogated. So for example, once I've been on a call with an engineer and a PM, they were both males, this is important for the story, and they were doubling down on every my word and scrutinizing me and even making jokes about like some women's stuff, and it was really inappropriate. And unfortunately, that could happen because smaller companies, they don't invest in coaching the employees and they let them do interviews as they feel. And I was not aware about biases as a concept in hiring before I joined a big tech company that really forced me to go through the interviewers program. And we have the same program at Zalando for every person who is allowed to do hiring. You have to complete a course and then you will have to shadow 3 interviews for every interview type. something like that. And that ensures, or at least reduce the chances that I will be speculating on my biases, I will be tending to hire people that are like me, I will be disregarding people based on their identity and things like that. You as a candidate, unfortunately, you can never tell for sure if this is the case of a bias from the side of the interviewer, or you just failed in the interview because you could not answer certain questions in the way that they were expected to be answered. So this information is only helpful to know in regards of the varying quality of interviews that you might expect and be prepared to. And you can also partially stop blaming yourself. If you could not make it through the interview, maybe the interviewer was a problem. By the way, if you like this video and you want to master job interviews, then give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button down below. It's important for me and for YouTube algorithms. And we're moving on. Now let's discuss how can you realistically prepare for the initial call apart from knowing whom you will be talking to. For every initial call, you can expect two parts that you can be prepared for. The first part is your introduction, is your story. It is important for every job interview call where you need to introduce yourself to a new person, by the way, but on the initial call, it's your chance to set the first impression right. So I recommend really rehearsing the introduction. And the good introduction is no longer than 1 minute, because longer than that and it feels that you are going too in depth. And you can justify it yourself if you record yourself on the video, and if the video is taking longer than 1 minute, I can guarantee you would be wishing that a person could be more concise. And so think about what is the most vital information that the person should know about you. This information normally would include your background and your motivation. And then rehearse the best version of your introduction. So my introduction would be, if I were looking for a job right now. Hi, my name is Ines. I'm a principal product designer with 15 years of experience. I work at Zalando currently, and I work on a product that is called Retail Center. It is a product that is used internally for the people who work at the retail part at Zalando. And I've been working there for 3.5 years, and now I'm ready for a new challenge. I want to find a team that is moving faster, for example, and I would add there some piece about my motivation. And this is basically it. This is everything that is required. If you are worried that your introduction is too short, you might add at the end, please let me know if you have some questions or if you want me to elaborate on some parts of my experience. And this is really the best strategy, because as an interviewer, I have seen your CV and your portfolio, so I have a raw idea anyway. And if I have already some questions about your past experience, this is where I can ask them. If you have an introduction that is too long, that means that you are repeating me the information that I already know, and this is extremely boring. So just give an overview of your current experience and talk about your motivation and why you are there on the call with them today. I mentioned that already. Please record yourself on the video. Talking with the camera is highly unnatural. I can tell you all about that, but it is really helpful for you to hear how you sound, to improve some things, because it's not only the storytelling that matters, but also the tone of voice, your gestures, your facial expression, and all that you can spot on a video and improve. Another advice I could give you is to find a mentor and just rehearse the introduction with them. It is even faster because a mentor could tell you exactly what is wrong, and you don't experience this awkward conversation with a video, because I'm sure if you are talking with a real person, you will perform better with your introduction than when you're talking with a camera. Introduction is very important to set the first impression right. That's why on my course, Job Interviews for UX Designers, we practice that extensively during the first workshop. Because again, you will be using it everywhere. For every person that you encounter during the hiring process, you would need to do the introduction, and your introduction should be great, it should be clear, it should be concise. So spend time on rehearsing that. It's my advice for you. Another part that you can realistically prepare for is the behavioral questions. Oh my God, the behavioral questions, they are the beast. I know it is very hard to prepare for them. Virtually, you don't know what questions will be coming, but they are definitely quite standardized, especially if we are talking about the interview with a recruiter. The best thing you can do is that you can Google the most common behavioral questions just on the internet, or ask ChatGPT to come up with the list. The thing is that if you will source out enough tricky questions, just ask ChatGPT to generate you 100 questions, you will spot that there are common topics that repeat themselves. In my opinion, those topics are your worst experience, your conflict with a colleague, your weakness, your strength, your major achievement. And you can realistically think about them up front and prepare what would you highlight if this question would come. And I especially recommend thinking upfront about your weaknesses and a conflict you had on a job, because everything that is negative will require for you a certain storytelling and a certain approach so that it sounds like something beneficial for your own story. And by the way, you cannot answer that you've never had a conflict in your life or you never had a mistake on a project, because this way you will come across either not experienced enough or just not reflecting on your own journey, and this is what you want to avoid. Even if you are fresh from university, think about the situation where somebody disagreed with you or you made a mistake. And then what you need to do is that you need to turn this negative situation into the learning experience. This way you will show me that you are improving as a professional after you encounter obstacles. But only please don't sound really obvious. Just don't tell, oh, I had this conflict and now I've learned that the teamwork is really important. Like, give details, make it sound realistic, make it sound less formal. Don't sound like an answer from a free ChatGPT version. On the job interviews course for UX designers, we practice behavioral questions in the same way, and you can do that too, and please do that. Please think about your answers upfront. But also don't be hard on yourself if during the initial call or during the culture fit call, where those questions are always asked, you encounter a question that you did not think of an answer upfront. Because this is the idea of behavioral questions. They are meant to catch you off guard. So what can you do if you have found yourself in the moment, in the situation where you are dealing with the question, you don't have an immediate answer? There are actually many techniques that you can use to come up with the answer on spot. And the technique that I love and that we practice on the job interviews course for UX designers is that first you tell, oh, this is such a great question, let me think about that. And really, you need to create a pause for yourself to think. The worst thing you can do is to rush to an answer that is not well thought through. Because we as interviewers, we also do not expect a person finding all the answers on the spot. We are willing to give the time for a candidate just to be able to hear a well-structured, good thought-through line of thought. After you took this pause, I can guarantee you will have at least one idea for an answer. Just don't shoot it right away, unstructured, but try to wrap it in a certain storytelling structure that is easy to hear. The most basic structures is to say, on one hand this, on the other hand that, or I believe that there are 3 components, or whatever, like the first, the second, the third. Try to make it easy to follow your train of thought for an interviewer. Because the worst thing that is happening on an interview, and I can tell you from my own experience being on the hiring manager part, is when a person rushes to the answer and the answer is unstructured, and in the middle of the answer the person comes with a new idea, and then those 2 ideas, they start to conflict with each other. And this is all happening because the person is not giving themselves a pause and is not structuring the answer. So a very tactical thing that you can do to make sure that you will not forget the techniques is to practice them on the video. Same as with the introductions. You can record yourself answering random questions, making sure that you gave yourself a pause and then you used a structure for your answer. By seeing yourself on the video, you can then control how you look, what's your tone of voice and such things. Another tactic that you can use is to find yourself a mentor who will run those questions with you, and this, in my opinion, will be more natural and will lead to faster learning. You can find, by the way, a free mentor on the platforms as ADPL list. Just make sure your mentor did the hiring themselves. Because if your mentor is just an experienced senior designer and they never did any hiring, unfortunately they cannot tell how it feels on an actual interview, and I'm afraid the feedback that you will receive will not be to the point. But I recommend really thinking upfront how you will be practicing it, because it's not that easy on the spot, and you might know that already, especially if you are watching this video, so you might want to master job interviews then. The thing is that I believe that many people think it is optional, and actually I myself, I never practiced before job interviews, except maybe one time when I was preparing for my first interview in English, and then I was not sure how do I sound and I wanted to get some confirmation for myself, but that was a different purpose. But previously we had a lot of chances to practice job interviews in a real environment, because the tech was booming, a lot of companies did hiring, and they were also not that picky to the candidates because they were fighting for talents. But right now the situation on the UX job market has changed. You know that very well probably. And we're not given a lot of chances, we're not given a lot of incoming job interview invitations. And also companies, they want right now a candidate to perform to 120% during the job interviews to get hired. They can now just afford it because they have hundreds of applicants for every job ad that they post. And we need to be mindful about that and change our strategies and tactics. I believe that the best strategy you can take is to practice everything upfront before going to an actual job interview, to make sure that you show your best as a UX designer. And that was it for today. I hope you liked this video, and now you know how can you prepare for the initial call with the company. If you want to master job interviews, then hit the subscribe button down below and click the bell. There's going to be more videos in this series, and this way you will get a notification when they will come out. Also, feel free to grab my free job interview preparation checklist. The link will be down in the description, and you will be added to the waitlist to the job interviewers for UX designers course that is starting soon. If you don't want to stay in this waitlist, you can unsubscribe anytime, but if you stay, you will get the best deal and you can join to the course among the first. I hope that was helpful, and I see you in the next video.